Hi again. Right, I think I said on the last video that I would put out a video about questioning, and here it is. So this one is about what questions to use, or which are the best or most effective questions to use during a cold call. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit of an insight into question types, and I'm sure some of you will have already seen some of these questions, but bear with me. But I think they're important. Now, most coaches and trainers probably don't really think that it's necessary to go into question types at this stage in the sale. They usually go into it when it's the face-to-face part. But I personally think that without knowing what question types there are out there, you won't really understand what kind of responses you're inviting on a cold call if you use the wrong type of question at the wrong point during that cold call. What I'll do then after the video is I'll relate those types of questions to the cold call, so that you can really see how these question types fit into the whole cold calling process. And I'm going to look at two types of cold calls, the first one is going to be the type of cold call that's made direct to a decision maker. Alright, so that's typically if you're calling somebody to sell big ticket items. It could be real estate, it could be automobiles, it could be IT infrastructure. It's typically very low structured organizations or a one-man band where you are able to make a call directly to the decision maker. The other type of cold call I'm going to look at for questioning today is the type where you are calling a business, i.e. an organization with a structure behind it, which means you are very unlikely to get through to the decision maker straight away. You probably have to jump through a few hoops, or maybe a gatekeeper or two, to get through to that person that you want to speak to. So we're going to look at both scenarios, but before we do, as I said, what I'd like to do is just go through, I'm just going to share with you this little video on questioning techniques, and then I'll come back. So here's a quick little video on question types. I'm going to go through 3 question types. These are very, very well known. We're going to look at open questions, we're going to look at probing questions, and we're going to look at closing questions. Now, they could be referred to slightly differently, but as we go through it, I'm sure you'll be familiar with some of these question types from some learning or training or reading that you may have done previously. If you haven't, then this should be a nice little insight to you for question types that you can use, not just in the cold call, but throughout the whole sales process. Okay, we're going to start first of all with open questions, and for each question type I'm going to go through what are the typical start words that identify what type of question this is. And with that, I'll just help you to, I guess, give you ways of how you can remember what an open question is and how to identify it. So here's the first one, open questions. I remember open questions by using TED, because the 3 open question words for me are tell, explain, and describe. You may hear this quite often when you listen to a chat show host. They generally use these words as the start words to their open questions to give their guests an opportunity to say as much as they can about whatever it is that they're here to talk about. So tell, explain, and describe. And what they invite is a long and more detailed answer. So the next questions are probing questions. Probing questions are fantastic for really diving into detail and also for directing flow of conversation. Best way of remembering them, for me, I always use this little rhyme. I know 6 faithful serving men. They taught me all I know. Their names are who, what, why, when, where, and how. The image should be something that you won't forget quickly, but the way I see it is like 5 bums on a bench, and that's the way I always remember it, and hence that's why I'm sharing it with you now. So again, probing questions, why are they good? Because they are really good at helping you to get some specification or some clarification on certain bits of information when you're in a conversation. Okay, so closed questions. Do, does, did. These are typical start words for closed questions, as are these: can, could, have, is, are, was, will, would. Now, what you see here is a collective of types of words, and if you can just rewind back a little bit to school grammar days, you may know these are otherwise known as verbs. Verbs are doing words, and the reason that they are really good start words for closed questions are because it is asking you the word here. Each of these words is saying, do you or don't you? Does or doesn't it? Did or did it not? Can or can it not? Therefore, kind of inviting a closed answer. So they're all verbs, doing words, and what they're asking for is a yes or a no answer. You did or you didn't. So they're doing words, you did or you didn't. So just to summarize the 3 question types that we've looked at, I've just popped it in the question funnel, which will make it more familiar to you, because I'm sure some of you or most of you will have come across this at some stage in your sales career. If you haven't, then this is a nice little intro to it. Now, typically open questions sit at the top of a funnel, a sales funnel, and the idea is that you start with open questions, then you start to probe, and then you close down, hence the funnel. Now, in this particular diagram, as you can see, they're not as clear-cut as the first layer, then the second layer, and then the third layer. And this is why I kind of like this diagram, because it shows that there are grey areas and you can deviate from the norm in certain situations. And cold calling just happens to be one of those situations. Let me explain more now. Okay, so that was the questioning video that I put together for you. That was just to give you an insight into the basic question types, which, yeah, I know you probably already know about most of these question techniques or types. And so for me, it's really just a refresher, a kind of way of helping you to remember the different types of questions as I talk you through the different stages of a cold call. Yes, I said stages because I believe that the cold call part of the sales process is almost a process in itself. And I write about this in my book, and what we've got is you've got 3 stages, I always think, in a cold call. You've got stage 1, the meet and greet stage. You've got stage 2, which is the exploratory stage. And then you've got stage 3, which is the move on to the next level stage. So let me try and explain that and why I split it down. First and foremost, on a cold call, to be able to be successful on a cold call, you've got to know what your objective is. And yep, you might be thinking, well, it's to make a sale, isn't it? Yeah, of course it's to make a sale. On the surface of it, yes, or ultimately yes, but you've got to also make your objective realistic, because if you don't make your objective realistic, how do you pat yourself on the back and say, well done, let's move on, I'm motivated to keep going? You can't do that unless you make it an objective that is realistic. Challenging, yes, but realistic too. So how do you make it challenging and realistic? First of all, you've got to think about moving the sale forward and getting to the next level, and more importantly, making sure you're not wasting your time. So that, put it all together, 3 stages. You're looking at milestones at each stage to get to the ultimate objective of getting closer to the sale. So stage 1, meet and greet, or is the stage where your objective is to engage the other person to you. So this is about building rapport. This is about getting them to like you and getting them to want to continue listening to you or talking to you. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of you that's had the experience where somebody puts the phone down as soon as you say a few words and they go, yeah, not interested, thank you very much, put it down. That's harsh. So first achievement is to get past that initial meet and greet stage. How do you do that? Well, what you've got to do is, remember, this is about questioning, so I'm not going to talk about every aspect of it, but the key thing here is engage them, introduce, be really clear about who you are, what you're calling for, and then come in with a really good question that links you straight into the next stage. If you interrupt your meet and greet with a question like, how are you? Right? Now, we all know that how is a start word for a probing question. You've got to think to yourself, you're now probing into their personal space. Why would you do that at this stage? You don't even know them, and why would they want to answer you? Personally, when somebody says, how are you to me, I'm a little bit taken back because I'm thinking, well, you don't even know me and I'm really not going to explain to you what's going through my head right now. So it doesn't really work for me. And I would say the majority of people that I've spoken to, the number of times I've called, the number of times I've received calls, I know it doesn't work. It's a rapport breaker, so don't use it. What to do is use a question that is relevant to what you've just said about yourself, how you've introduced yourself, but nicely, very gently links you into the next stage, which is what I said is the exploratory stage. And your objective at this stage is to qualify the call. Qualify, as I've said to you numerous times before in other videos, is about making sure that this call is worth your time, or this call and any follow-up calls and any other work that you might have to do in relation to this particular call is even worth it, because there's some potential there for you to work with them. And to know what the potential is, you've got to have your list of questions. Questions that are going to help you to maintain control of the call. Now, let's look at B2B first of all. If you're talking to a gatekeeper and it's B2B, your exploratory part of the call might very well be to see if you can get to the right person or who the right person is. And the gatekeeper may have passed you through, so you could be speaking to a decision maker whether you have made a B2B call or a B2DM call at this stage. You could have been declined access to the decision maker for whatever reason, so this exploratory part of your call is now going to be a call that you're going to have with the gatekeeper rather than the decision maker. Now, of course, it's going to be different if you're speaking to a decision maker as you are to a gatekeeper, because the likelihood is the gatekeeper may not have as many answers as the decision maker would have, naturally, and that's to be expected. So in which case, this is where you've got to maybe alter your question techniques and your type to suit the person you're speaking to. Now, if it was me and I was speaking to a decision maker, then my questions would be a little bit more probing, just to understand a little bit more around the whole situation. Because if I'm probing, I'm getting a slightly more open type of answer, and I'm able to give the decision maker a little bit more space to speak more, which they probably will because they know more, they have more information to give you. And then my idea then would be just to maintain the control and the flow of that conversation by continuing to use more probing questions than closed. If, however, I'm talking to a gatekeeper because I haven't been able to get through to the decision maker, then I would probably use a few more closed questions as opposed to probing, because a gatekeeper may not have as many answers to give you or as much information to give you as you would like, or as a decision maker would. So let me give you some examples. With a decision maker, I might ask a question such as, when was the last time you invested in something like this? That's an okay question to ask a decision maker because they'd have the answer to that. But it's not an okay question to ask a gatekeeper because they may not have the answer to that. So I might be more likely to change that question to a closed question, which puts less pressure on the gatekeeper. And this is where I might say, do you happen to know anything about whether the company invests in this kind of thing? So I've started with do you know, which gives the gatekeeper a bit of an in or an out, an option, and it makes it easier for them to answer. I also use what's called alternative closed questions. So I'd say, do you have field salespeople or salespeople that are just in the office? So that's an example of another closed question, but it's making it easier for the gatekeeper to give you the information to help you to qualify that call. On the other hand, with the decision maker, I might ask the question, so how is your company, how's your sales force structured? So hopefully this is making sense in terms of which are the predominant question types that you would ask who, so that you can make the other person feel more comfortable and it's more respectful towards that other person depending on who you're speaking to. So that's the exploratory stage. Then when you get past that exploratory stage, at some stage you're going to want to either, with a gatekeeper, reschedule the call because you haven't been able to get through to the decision maker, or if you're through to the decision maker or you're talking to a decision maker anyway, then you're able to start using your closing questions now to close it down to the next stage in the set. So with a decision maker, based on what we've spoken about now, do you think it's worth us having a meeting, a face-to-face meeting? Yeah. Whereas with a gatekeeper, this is where you might ask the question, so when is the best time to call back? So now we've actually turned them the opposite way around. So with the gatekeeper, we're now asking more probing questions. I know it sounds bizarre, doesn't it? But that kind of works somehow. I think the key thing here about questioning is you've really got to understand who you're talking to and know what you're trying to achieve at each stage of the call. And that's why really it's difficult to say it's black and white. It's difficult for me to say these are the only questions to use, but it is helpful for me to say and suggest to you that if you use at the meet and greet stage, if you use the right questions at the right time primarily, then you are more likely to be successful on your cold calls. I hope for you it's been helpful. I hope it's given you some tips. If nothing else, it'll put some thoughts in your mind about what kind of questions are you asking, when are you asking them, and are they giving you the right types of answers or the favorable answers that help you to get through each stage of that cold call successfully, right? Got any questions? As always, I am open to your questions. I love helping you guys. That's why I do these videos, in the hope that it will help you to become better, more professional, more confident in what you're doing, and love doing what you're doing. I do. So I will speak to you soon. If I don't speak to you before the next video, then I'll see you on the next video. If you want to give me some thoughts and ideas of what you want in that next video, give me a shout. Thank you again for subscribing and keep watching. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.